When you consider road racing in the United States of America, one track always comes to mind, and that is Watkins Glen International, home to round 6 of the Afterburn IndyCar Series presented by Glacier TV. Will Vincent, Doyle Johnson in the booth as always. And Doyle, this looks at the moment like it's going to be one of the most exciting races we've seen all season long.
I would agree with that. We've got a great field out here today. We've got a lot of the heavy hitters from the IndyCar series, including Yang O, Mark Feynman, of course, and Joram Mizrahi, and Marco Vietinen, kind of a name from the past there, and Nico Brandt, Matthew Lambertson. We've got a lot of talent on the track today.
Oh yeah, you mentioned we've got the standard road racing guys, Mark Fangman, Joram Mizrahi, Nico Brandt, Marco Vietinen, Matthew Lambertson, Esteban Ballard, they're all here. And then currently at the top of the qualifying timesheet, not only last season's Premier Series winner, but also world record holder here for Watkins Glen, Young O, currently with qualifying time staggering 1 minute 28.048, over 10th of a second faster than Mark Fangman, currently sat in second. And that's not the sort of thing you'd be used to seeing Mark Fangman pushed back in qualifying.
No, that's for sure, especially in our series. So we've had some really good racing in the past, especially on the road courses. And today I'm expecting to see, it's going to step up another level today based on the field that we're going to see out here today. A lot of good racers, so I'm really excited to see what happens today.
Yeah, 25 drivers have currently set a qualifying time. Everyone is in with the 105% rule that was put into force for this race due to the level of competition and the just tremendous speed that people traverse this race course. To run through the track very quickly, it's 3.36 miles in length, 11 corners. Beautiful, beautiful racetrack with so many twists, turns, undulations. I talk about this every week, but here, the first pretty much third of the racetrack, flat out, as soon as you come through turn number 1, all the way up the hill, down towards the outer loop, Doyle, you're going to be pushing, and that's going to create some great drafting opportunities.
Yes, it is, and there's been a lot of talk this week, since you're the race administrator making some of these decisions. One of the things that's been kind of the talk of the town, if you will, is why you made the choice to cut out the chicane on the back there and go with this particular race course configuration.
I hate how you put me on the spot so early in this. It's always been the fact that, I know Watkins Glen's a great racetrack, but I always feel that in a big field like this, the chicane does more harm than good. Just separating, slowing the cars down, you don't really get that many overtaking opportunities there. But this layout, it gives drivers a lot more time to, spread out, especially on lap number 1. We're going to be looking very carefully at turn number 1. I know race control are going to be keeping an eye there, and they're not against throwing a full course caution if cars get tangled up coming down to turn number 1. But the most important thing I think here is, with the field the size it is, it's just going to have to make sure that these drivers keep it safe. So we're going to run through grid momentarily. Your pole sitter, Young O, even faster time, a 1 minute 27.891. Staggering speed there by Young O. Mark Fangman in second, 1 minute 28.17. Joram Mizrahi is in third. Marco Vietinen in fourth. Nico Brandt and Esteban Ballard will line up in row number 3, with Afterburn teammates Matthew Lambertson and Mark Warmington running up on row number 4. Carsten Borchers and Joachim Podnitzer will line up in row 5, with Akim Enbach and Pierre Bourdon running up in row 6. Mike Larson and Andrew Aitken in row 7. Olaf Borchet and Jussi Nieminen in row number 8. Alan Wilson and Steve Clays in row 9, with Thomas Kroll and Randy Krosno rounding out row number 10. Dave Jinks, Jeffrey Kohlbergen in row number 11. Julian Pham, Carl Conway in row number 12. And bringing up the rear, John Ailes in 25th and last position.
And any resemblance to the drivers' actual names is purely coincidental.
Yeah. One of the biggest field, in fact, the record is just been matched for the biggest starting field in Afterburn Series history. So that's going to make things very interesting coming down towards turn number 1. This one straightaway, it's not that wide. You can only really get 3 wide and a bit coming down into turn 1. So these drivers are going to make sure they've got to be on it as they come down into turn number 1, and just give each other a lot of room as they come down. There's a huge runoff area as they go down into 1, but the last thing you're going to want is people coming back onto the track as they go up the sweeping hill and messing up other people's races early on.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see that turn 1 is going to be kind of a challenge, because you've got all that extra racetrack or parking lot out there that I have a feeling we're going to see full of cars during the first lap, and probably it's going to be utilized quite a bit. So that's pretty standard. So we'll see how many cars lose a front wing during that first. Hopefully, you won't have to throw that full course caution.
Oh yeah, so we'll just very quickly coming down to turn 1. Note on the outside of the corner, that huge runoff area there. I know race control are also going to be keeping an eye on people cutting that grass just a little bit, because that is the fast way around the racetrack, to use that outside part of the tarmac as much as possible. And then they come up the hill here, very, very sweepy, as we're currently looking on board with Marco Vittinen in the number 2 Glacier racing machine. Coming up the hill, it pretty much is single file up here. I mean, you can go too wide, but you've got to be really ballsy to try and make a move. And then onto this very, very long backstretch. Cars will be reaching almost 180 miles an hour as they come down towards the outer loop. And Doyle, this is a place where you could see a lot of drafting, but at the same time it also gives drivers a good opportunity to move out of the way if they are, being put one lap down.
Yeah, and I would suspect that this, like you say, is a good passing zone, a good safe place for any kind of back markers to belong. And then again, the draft is going to be a key factor. You get 2 or 3 cars butted up against each other, and they are going to be flying down that back straight. And the question is will they realize the extra speed they have in the draft and be able to handle that long sweeping corner that's coming up with the increased speed? So that's going to be an interesting factor too.
Oh yeah, despite the fact that the outer loop, that long 180-degree right-hander, does have a runoff area on the outside, the way the corner is banked, if you get onto that extra piece of tarmac, it's very difficult to keep it out of the wall. And let's not forget, since the last time we were here last December, the draft model has changed a little bit as well. So these drivers are going to experience the draft a lot more than they used to the last time they raced here, as they're coming down now into the boot section. I just love the way American racetracks are named. They straight to the point. We're into the boot, and you've got the heel, and then coming up you're going to have, sorry, you've got the toe now, and the next corner is going to be the heel.
Yeah, everything has a boot. And it's interesting, if you look at the track, it looks like you should be able to handle some of these corners at extremely high speeds, but in reality, the way the banking and the way the corner's set up, they're not quite as fast as they look. You really have to catch your braking zones exactly right, or you will be off the track. So the track is a lot more technical than it appears when you're just rolling around the track, say, from the outside or looking at it from above.
Yeah, and turn 9 is a very tricky corner as they come onto the classic part of the racetrack, the original racetrack used for many, many years to hold many Formula 1 Grand Prix. And then through turn number 10, and then you see the pace car is already about to make that hard turn down towards pit lane. Double file coming through turn 11, the final corner. Young O is going to bring the field down to green flag racing as round 6 of the Afterburn IndyCar series on Glacier TV is green.
Okay, here comes turn 1. Let's see what we get here.
So far, looks as though...
Oh, very respectful racing there in turn 1.
Everyone looks like they're coming up the hill okay there. 3 wide as they come through turn 2 and 3. Everyone manages to get through cleanly okay. Just having a look through. Most drivers, pretty much everyone has managed to get through turn 3 okay. Now this is going to be the next big challenge. Are they all going to be able to make it through the outer loop okay? Young O is still your race leader. Mark Fangman pressing him hard with Draw Mazzari in third. Marco Vittinen making a pass from the outside there of Esteban Banal, who had a nice start from the 5th position. Matthew Lamberton currently sat in 6th. Nico Brandt in 7th, but for the most part it does look as though everyone is still pretty much through okay.
Yeah, and the field's definitely sorted out. It was from their original qualifying positions. Several people have moved quite a ways back in the field, but that was, I'm sure, intentional, just to make sure everybody got through without any damage so we can actually get a race going here. That was quite impressive.
Biggest loser in the race so far was Nico Brandt, who started in the 5th spot. He's now all the way down into the 7th position. Mark Warmington has gone down from 5th to 20th. So Mark Warmington having trouble early on in this race. Look, maybe he's just trying to, just make sure he wasn't involved in any early start wrecks. But for the most part, it does look as though, we've got confirmation that Mark Warmington actually started from pit lane. So as Young O completes lap number 1 with Mark Fangman in 2nd, Jordan Mazzari in 3rd, Mark Vietjen in 4th, and Istvan Balal in 5th. For the most part, it's been pretty good clean racing so far.
Yeah, and it looks like you've got a little bit of a gap opening up between Nico Brandt and Joachim Polzer for the 8th position, where you find Karsten Borchers, Pierre Bourdin, Akim Anabach. So there's a little bit of a gap starting to open up there in the field. So I expect to see maybe 2 to 3 packs of racing as the race matures.
Oh yeah, definitely, and I think that first pack will consist of everyone from 1st all the way down to 7th, with Nico Brandt currently sat in the 7th position at the moment. As you see, Matthew Lamberton having a little bit of a look down to the inside of Istvan Balal. Maybe he's going to see whether he can have another opportunity to come into turn number 8. Not quite close enough, but it does look as though, you say, that first pack, the first 7 drivers, then from PA all the way through to about P14 will be your second pack. And then it'll be interesting to see drivers like Mark Warmington trying to make their way through the field. Randy Klosno potentially as well. And Jeffrey Kohlbergen is actually the first car. He's down in pit lane. He's got himself some suspension damage by the look of it. And I also believe that Olav Berchov had an issue as well, I believe in the final corner as they completed lap number 1. Sorry, lap 2 he had issue.
And you look up front and you see Mark Fangman trying to mount a charge and trying to stay with Young O, and I think this is quite a surprise for Mark Fangman. Usually when he gets clean air, he checks out, and now he's in the situation where he's got a driver that's, according to the qualifying results, is considerably faster than he is. And right now you can see it on the track, and he's opening up a gap between the 3rd place driver of Jordan Mazzari. So it's kind of interesting what's going on up front here. I wonder if Young O can hold that gap there.
Well, yeah, Young O was the only driver to get into the 1 minute 27s. We saw last week as Adam Embeck getting very sideways into turn number 6. We saw Mark Fangman last week at Mid-Ohio was pretty much toying with Miss Hari for the second stage of the race until the second and final pit stop. But it does look as though, on paper at the moment, Young O has clearly got the advantage in that number 25 machine. And let's not forget, as I said earlier, Young O's racing credentials are, simply put, he won last year's iRacing IZOD Premier Series, and he's also the world record holder for this track, so he knows this track better than most.
And I think he'll definitely be using that to his advantage, and we'll see as we go along how long Mark Fangman can mount a chase, and whether Jordan Mazzari will indeed catch up to Mark Fangman, because we saw this last week. So there may actually be a breakaway on the leader, and then the pack may shore up going from 2 down to possibly position 8.
Yeah, we're just having a look back on that rear wing of Marco Vietinen in the number 2 machine. He's currently sat in the 4th position. Nice to see Marco back in the series once again. His last race at Mosport ended on one of the famous landmines, as they will always be remembered at Mosport. But here, currently sat in 4th position, doing a nice job there. Currently 4.5 seconds behind the race leader, Young O. But all of these top 8 drivers are currently less than 10 seconds from the race lead. And 2nd through to 7th is currently separated by less than 4 seconds.
Yeah, we've definitely got a battle going on here between Istvan Balal and Matthew Lambertson, who we know both drivers to be extremely fast and always up on the wheel. So we're going to see, hopefully these guys can continue to battle without taking each other out, because I wouldn't like to see either one of these drivers out before the end of the race, because they always provide excitement, and they're definitely fan favorites, but we're going to see how long we can stay in line here.
Yeah, Matthew Lamberton in the number 19 Boy Scouts of America car returned to iRacing a couple of months ago after taking himself a 3-month absence. Currently doing a sterling job in that 6th position. I mean, when we talk about drivers who can be aggressive when they need to be, Matthew Lamberton and Esteban Ballal always stand out. I mean, we've seen Ballal twice now in this series so far, charge from the rear of the field. And for me personally, I think that I really want to see how Ballal managed to cope under a full race distance when he's not involved in any incidents, because he did a sterling job last week out of mid-Ohio, as he did at Daytona, and it would be nice for Ballard to get a nice clean top 5 here.
Well, I'm sure he would agree with you on that. And like I say, you got Matthew Lamberton putting in chase, and then interestingly enough, you know, you've got Nico Brandt right behind them, and it goes to play out again like we talked about last week. You know, is Nico just hanging back and kind of waiting for these guys to get tangled up so he can get by, or is he saving tires and fuel? Because we know Nico drives inside his head, so he definitely has some kind of strategy based on where he ended up in the pack.
Oh yeah, definitely. Nico Brandt is not used to be sat all the way down in the 7th position. That sums up the quality of the racing here today, as Nico Brandt getting very close to the rear wing of that number 19 machine on Matthew Lamberton. We'll run through the order at the end of lap number 5. Young O is still your race leader, with Mark Fangman currently sat in the 2nd position, Jorm Hisari in 3rd, Marco Viitanen in 4th, and Esteban Ballal rounding out your top 5. Lamberton's currently sat in the 6th position, with Nico Brandt 7th, Carson Borchers in 8th, Joachim Poltner in 9th, and Enbach in rounding out your top 10. But still so far, I believe we've only had a couple of drivers of incidents in pit lane, as Nico Brandt's getting very racy coming up the hill of Matthew Lamberton. We've only had a couple of drivers who's had incidents so far in this race. I believe Jeffrey Kohlbergen is currently scored as 2 laps down. He had an incident in pit lane at the start of this race. And Thomas Kroll, I believe, was also down pit lane, as well as Julian Pham. And I tell you what, Brandt is on the attack. Expect him to try and find a moment to overtake Matthew Lamberton in that number 19 Boy Scouts of America car very, very soon. He's getting very, very close on the fast part of this racetrack. But it'll be interesting to see whether or not Lamberton can hold his own on the tighter, trickier section of the boot. It does look as though Lamberton's been able to stretch out to about a couple of car lengths advantage as they come through into the heel corner. The next corner is going to be turn number 9. Nico Brandt was so powerful here last time by, and I think if he can get a little bit closer coming out of turn number 8, he can make a pass into turn 9. But as you come back onto that onto the original racetrack, it is such a difficult corner, as the corner just seems to fall away mid-through, Doyle. Oh, Nico Brandt into the wall.
Oh my gosh, that was catastrophic. Totally lost it coming around there, getting off the track, got loose in the grass, and then into the pit wall. Oh my gosh, how unfortunate.
I cannot believe that. We'll get a replay of that any moment now, but Nico Brandt in absolutely no understanding what happened there, just getting himself a little bit loose coming off the final corner in that number 24 DuPont machine, just grazing the wall as he tried to bring it down pit lane, just caught the pit lane wall essentially, and his day looks as though he could be out. As you look at it again, just the slightest of touches in that final corner just shows how unforgiving that last turn is.
Yeah, it actually looks like he lost traction. It wasn't that he got off the track, he lost traction just past the apex of the corner there and slid in off, and then of course his car is pointing in the direction straight at the water barriers for pit lane, so he had nothing else he could do with that.
Yeah. So that is a moment again for Nico Brandt. He's been having terrible luck for the last couple of weeks. Young O is still your race leader, with Mark Fangman in 2nd, Jorm Hisari in 3rd, Marco Viitanen in 4th, Esteban Ballal in 5th. But that is one thing we did not expect to see this earlier on. Nico Brandt on lap 6 of this race looks as though his day is pretty much done. And that gives Matthew Lamberton a little bit of breathing space to try and close down Esteban Ballal, because for a couple of laps he was coming in serious attack as he gets a little bit sideways coming into turn number 1 himself. But this will be interesting now to see if Lamberton can try and close that gap back down to the number 20 machine of Mr. Van Baarle.
Well, and that's at the same time Mr. Van Baarle is trying to close in on the number 2 of Marco Vietnan. So there's a couple things going on there, and he was definitely gaining ground there. Not sure what happened. Looks like Marco managed to pull away a little bit. Now that Matthew does not have Nico Brandt, hovering all over his wing, he can relax a little bit and probably get his mind forward as opposed to what's in behind him.
Oh, yeah, and I'll tell you what, Nico Brandt is going to be so disappointed. Let's not forget, he was so in for it last season. As you see there, a pass for, I believe, the number 17 machine, Mark Warmington, just overtaking Steve Clays. That is the battle for 13th position. Mark Warmington just being able to make the pass on Steve Clays there. Really well done by Warmington. He dropped back from, I believe, 8th position at the start, all the way back to the 20th position. He is making his way back through the field. And I tell you what, Mark Warmington's trying to get his way back, get up to 13th position now, but the cars ahead of him, starting with Dave Jinks next. That is not going to be easy to... Sorry, Dave Jinks is a lap down. Andrew Aitken, he's not going to be easy to get around, is Aitken.
And as his name implies, Dave Jinks, unfortunately, has been involved in several lap down incidents over the course of the season. And hopefully Mark Warmington can get by him cleanly. As you see Dave Jinks kind of pull off to the side there, hoping that Mark can get by before they get into any kind of corners.
Yeah, so I tell you what, Mark Warmington's doing a nice job getting his way through the field. There are passing opportunities on this racetrack, but it's sometimes very difficult for drivers to make and just set up that move perfectly. As we see, Mike Larson's trying to have a little bit of a go on Pierre Bondon ahead of him. That is a battle for 10th position. See Mike Larson diving all the way down to the inside there. That's not going to work because he's going to have the unoptimal line into the next corner unless he's going to do the switch arm, which he's not going to be able to do so. That is one of the issues as you come through the outer loop. You might have the right line into the outer loop itself, but if you can't manage to make the job done into the next corner, you're pretty much on the unoptimal line and you've got to sort yourself out. And as we come down past the start-finish line at the end of this lap, we're going to go inboard with Young O for the moment. He's currently set the fastest lap of the race so far. Astronomical speed by Young O. 1 minute 29.2 is his fastest race lap. And he set that 1 minute 27 in qualifying. Just have a look at him now as he goes into turn number 1. Beautiful speed for the apex. Running it just that little bit wide. Just getting a little bit of dust up on those tyres as he comes up the hill. And he's got lap traffic ahead of him. That is Thomas Kroll in the number 63 machine. But for Young O, he's doing a sterling job here in that first position as he comes down the back straight. So just listen to him for a couple of corners. And as he comes into the boot section of the racetrack, just the steering control from Yang O here is just absolutely astronomical. He's riding aboard with him still for the rest of this lap. And you can just see the braking points, the turning points, all just absolutely inch perfect. And you notice how he only really does one steering input into the corner, doesn't try and chuck the car around and have to adjust it 3 or 4 times, getting a little bit loose there. And then as he comes into the final 2 corners, this is always the most difficult section of the racetrack, timing speed through the penultimate corner into the final corner. Beautiful once again, and this shows why at the end of lap number 10, Young O is your race leader by 2.7 seconds over Mark Backmann in second. Dromissari in third is currently now 7.2 seconds behind. Marco Vietnan is in fourth, just under 10 seconds behind the race leader. And then Istvan Badal runs at your top 5, and he is 11.7 seconds behind the race lead.
Yeah, and Will, you'll notice that spread out front that we talked about between first, second, third, and fourth place, there is no real battle going on there. Everybody has their own room on the track. They're kind of just racing themselves and the track at this point in time because of the distance between all the drivers. So that's something that was kind of expected when you have drivers of this caliber. And so I wonder if that's going to play out later when we have to do pit stops or are we going to be able to close that gap up front, or if this is the way the race is going to be for the rest of the time. But, back in the pack further, you see a lot closer racing going on.
Yeah, currently having a look at the number 11 there of Akim Enbach. Doing a pretty good job in his first race in the series, currently riding in the 9th position in that SimSync Pro team. Currently right behind his teammate, the number 59 machine of Politzer. These two guys in 8th and 9th position doing a very good job in their first race of the series, Doyle.
Yeah, we didn't know what to expect when we saw them on the course for the first time. So, like you said, that's a great way to get started in positions 8 and 9, and you've got another battle raging behind them. So, the question is, can they close up on the Carson Borchers, Matthew Lamberson, Istan Blow battle that's kind of spread out as well that we saw earlier?
And as you're currently looking now, number 72 machine of number 72 machine of Mike Larson in the sandwich there. He's got Andrew Aitken behind him, Pierre Bondo ahead, and these three drivers currently battling for 10th, 11th and 12th position. And Pierre Bondo currently sat in that 10th position in the Walter Wolf racing car. He's got a lot of attack. You see two wide there. Mike Larson trying to make a move as they come up the hill. He wouldn't quite be able to get the job done there. Had to step back out of the racing groove, back into the draft, and a surprise there that Andrew Aitken didn't have the opportunity to make a pass happen on him. But as they come down into the outer loop once again, is Larson going to have to make another opportunity as they go into the corner here? No, we saw him dove down to the inside last time. Maybe he's going to wait until the next corner now to see if he can make the job done. But Larson looking as though he's very racy behind that number 92 machine.
Yeah, I've been watching that battle for the last 3 laps, and this has been raging on. Mike's been trying to find some way around Borden this entire time, and it's pretty much the same thing.
Now he's got a chance. Now he's got a chance.
We've seen this. I've seen this at least 3 times before. We'll see if he can make it stick.
Bordeaux is so comfortable on that outside line into the corner there. And now, again, Bordeaux is going to have the optimal line coming into turn number 9. And Larson trying to dive it down to the inside. Not quite going to have the opportunity. I'd love to hear what they are talking about at the moment. But great battle going on for 10th, 11th and 12th spot. And I think Aitken's just sat there waiting for these two to collect each other so he can make up some 2 easy spots.
Yeah, I think Larson's probably pretty frustrated at this point. What you saw there has been the story of his life for the last 3 laps.
Larson! Just tagging Andrew Aitken there as well. And Aitken, I believe, just got a little bit of a touch. Going to have a look to see whether Aitken has any side pod damage to his right-hand side. But Mike Larson is not happy at all there. I would dread to think what he's saying to his spotter at the moment. But I'm sure that this debate between Larson and Bordeaux is going to rage on all the way through after this race.
I think so too. Larson got a little bit of a run on him, got a little bit too close to the back of his car, and a little bit too much brakes for inside that corner there. So, and then he starts to swap ends, and that's unfortunate. So, hopefully he's not discouraged, and he's just going to keep on his race and see if he can get back up there.
Yeah, and let's not make any bones about it. Pierre Bordeaux in the number 92 machine didn't actually make contact with Mike Larson. I think Mike Larson was just expecting to brake a little bit later into the corner, and as he had to put more pressure onto that brake pedal to avoid running into the back of the number 92, his car just literally switched ends into turn number 1. And Andrew Aitken, I've had a look, it doesn't look as though he's got too much damage to his number 27 race car, but very lucky escape for both drivers there.
Yes, and that little mishap gives a chance to Mark Warmington. Now he's got somebody in front of him. He can race now. He's had a lot of open air, and he's been trying to catch up. So that was his opportunity to get up there and take a look and see whether he can get himself through for some positions.
Matthew Lamberton in the number 19 machine has come down pit lane. He was in the 6th position. He has dropped down into the 14th spot. And I think this could just be strategy for Matthew Lamberton. The fuel window and the strategies you can take are literally all over the place here, depending on just what you want to achieve. But for Lamberton, he's got himself into a little bit of a traffic now, as he's got Olaf Borchert ahead of him, and then Mike Larson, who's going to be wanting to be charging back up to this pack with Mark Warmington and Andrew Aitken.
Yeah, right now this pack here with Larson, Borchert, Lambertson, and Niemann is probably where the racing excitement's going to be for the next lap or so.
As
And
you see
Lambertson make the pass.
Nice and simple there from Matthew Lambertson, not putting too much pressure on, moving the car to the right-hand side. Borchert just saw that as he came into the boot section of the racetrack, into the toe corner, and pretty much just moved out of the way, let him have the job, the pass cleanly there. So good job there for Borchert in that number 69 car.
That makes you wonder, since Larson and Lambertson are both teammates, what we're going to have here, and hopefully we'll see whether they're going to go toe-to-toe or whether they're going to be nice and stay together. It's hard to tell with these two racers right here. We've seen them, if you remember, at Daytona, spent the entire race swapping back and forth and back and forth, so they're fairly evenly matched.
I think it's probably in both their interests at the moment to try and catch back up to this pack ahead of them with Pierre Bourdais, Andrew Aitken, and I believe that Mark Wilmington has now caught this group in that battle for 9th, 10th and 11th. So if these two drivers can work together, especially in the draft, they might be able to catch these guys back up as the first cycle of pit stop evolves. I'll be interested to see just how the battle ahead of them carries on, as it does look as though Andrew Aitken's putting a lot of pressure now onto Pierre Bourdais in that number 92 machine, but Walt Wilmington has caught that pack now, so he is now right in the thick of it.
Yeah, and that's interesting to see whether the team concept on this road track is really going to matter or come into play, because generally a lot of racing here is it's individual. There's not a whole lot of opportunity for teams, but once again, maybe they can make that work by using the draft and keeping together and hopefully making up some time.
Oh yeah, and you see Andrew Aitken was making a move down to the inside of turn number 9. Lost a little bit of momentum. He's going to come, as he just grazed the wall a little bit. I'm wondering whether or not he's okay with that, but just grazing the wall, that's the second driver we've seen do that in the final corner. He might just be able to get away with that, but that gives Pierre Bourdais a little bit of breathing space for the start of this lap. And it'll be interesting to see what happens to him, as I believe Mark Wilmington is down in pit lane.
Yeah, he pulled right off there after that little battle and went right down pit lane, so I wonder if he's on a similar strategy as Lambertson there, being on the same team. So
yeah, Mark Wilmington looks like he might be on a free stop strategy, as we're currently just over a quarter of the way through round 6 of the Afterburn IndyCar Series on Glacier TV. Young O is still your race leader, Mark Fangman in second, Dror Misari in third, Marco Viitanen in fourth, Esteban Balau in fifth, Carson Borchers in sixth, Akeem Enbach in seventh, Joaquin Polzner in eighth, Pierre Bourdais in ninth, and Andrew Aitken rounding out your top 10.
Looking up front, Young O has opened up his 5-second gap between him and Mark Fangman, but then Mark Fangman also has an additional 5 seconds on Dror Misari, but Marco Viitanen seems to be trying to put a chase onto Dror and seeing if he can get up into that podium spot. He's got plenty of race left to see whether his strategy and whether he's got enough car to keep up with Dror.
Oh yeah, that'll be interesting to see whether or not Mark Fangman can get himself back into this race. Young O is currently pretty much dominating the race so far. His last lap time, 1 minute 29.4. All of his lap times have been in the 1 minute 29s. When you compare that to Mark Fangman, his last lap was a 1 minute 30.1. However, let's not forget Mark Fangman's fastest lap time, only 0.3 of a second behind Young O, as Young O is having to get all the way right there to avoid Jeffrey Kohlberger. As we now have Andrew Aitken down pit road, we have Olaf Butcher down pit road, UC Nimmerman down pit road, so a number of drivers there making their first pit stops, as first round of pit stops seems to be underway.
Like we saw last week, I wonder if Young O and Mark Fangman and possibly Dror Misari are going to stay out longer than the rest of the field and try to use up some of that fuel, hoping that they can have shorter pit stops later on in the race, like we saw last week. I wonder if that will work for Mark Fangman as it did last week.
Oh yeah, I'm having a look back. One of the most trickiest parts of this racetrack, as Balau also comes down into pit lane, one of the most difficult parts of this racetrack is when you come out of pit lane, because it's pretty much a single file all the way up the hill, and you've got to be really careful of the cars around you just to make sure you don't pull out right into some fast-coming traffic. As you're looking now, we're on board with Vincent out in that number 20 machine, just as he's going to do his fuel, his tyres, and then as he comes out of pit lane, just be very careful. Pit lane speed limit is there, so now we can accelerate up to racing speed. He's got to do that turn 1 on the inside, and now just keep an eye first of all on that yellow line. Now he can rejoin the racetrack, but as you can see, there's 2 seams there, and if you're the car coming out of pit lane, you really do have to be careful that if there's cars coming up behind you, stay to the right-hand side of that middle track seam. But for Ballau, he was just able to get out into clean air, no issue. So we're going to keep an eye on your top 4 or 5 drivers, see whether they come down pit lane. Young O currently is your race leader. He stays out for another lap, as I believe will Mark Backmann coming through the final corner now. He stays out for another lap as well. Hari in the number 46 machine. He's currently sat in the 3rd position, doing a pretty good job there. He is 11.6 seconds behind the race leader. Marco Viitanen is in the number 2 car. He is currently sat in the 4th spot, 16.6 seconds behind the race leader. And Esteban Ballau, as we talked about, was in 5th position. He's now come down pit lane and handed, I believe, that 5th position momentarily to Akim Enbach in the number 11 car.
Well, do you know if Mark was pitted yet? He seems to be staying out as well. Or did he pit earlier on in the race?
No, the top 4 drivers haven't pitted yet. And this is what I was talking about. You can go down either a 2 or a 3-stop strategy route here. And for Marco Viitanen, especially at the start of this race, I really did expect him to try and think outside the box, because last season he lost a lot of his races on strategy more than anything. So I'm sure that number 2 machine has just been sat down thinking of all the possible options as he came into this race just to maximise his opportunities. But he's currently doing a sterling job in that number 2 car, but all of the top 4 are still stayed out. They've not made their first pit stop yet.
Well, you see there, Hari getting into the traffic.
Young O down in pit lane, making his first scheduled pit stop in the number 25 machine, as Mark Backmann also comes down pit lane. So the top 2 drivers in this race have both come down pit lane. Joni, I believe, also coming down. Keep an eye out for Marco Viitanen and see whether he comes down this time as well. So your top 4 drivers are all coming down pit lane at the end. Our lap number 19 here, and it's time to get our calculator books out and see whether or not this will be a nice, easy 2-stop strategy for these guys.
Yeah, that's interesting. All 4 drivers decided they want to be on the same pit strategy, and I guess that's probably the way to go, especially when you have drivers like these and Young O still dominating up front. So, basically what you're looking at here is it's his race to lose. So it all depends on who's going to make the mistakes today.
So yeah, as they come out of pit lane, it looks as though they come out just the way they came in. Young O has pretty much re-inherited the race lead, from himself. Mark Backmann is still in 2nd, Joni still in 3rd, Marco Viitanen in 4th. We'll keep an eye out to see whether any of these drivers manage to gain any time through the sequence of pit stops. But I tell you what, Esteban Ballau is again right back on the rear of Marco Viitanen. Only about 1.5 seconds separates these 2 drivers at the moment, and we know Ballau's always up for a fight in the 20, and it looks as though he's going to have the opportunity with that number 2 machine.
Yes, we've seen that in the past. As long as he has a target in front of him, he tends to get right up on the wheel and get after whatever's in front of him. So I would be very surprised if Viitanen didn't have a battle coming up in the next lap or 2.
And just to interrupt very quickly there, Andrew Aitken has been able to get around Pierre Bourdon in the number 92 machine. It'll be interesting to see during the sequence of pit stops whether or not Mike Larson manages to gain any time on Bourdon at all to run through your top 10 in just a matter of moments' time once it's all settled itself out. As you see, Ballau now right on to the rear of Marco Viitanen through the final 2 corners, and these 2 drivers can have an amazing scrap for what would be 4th position on the racetrack. And really good driving by Ballau, I have to say. He's managed to keep his nose clean in this race. A couple of races so far this season, he's been involved in incidents not of his own doing, but that number 20 machine doing a sterling job, currently sat in the 5th position. And to be fair, still we have 18 cars on the lead lap. Randy Crosno, sorry, I believe is currently the last car on the lead lap, although he might have just gone down a lap through the sequence of pit stops. But Young O out front still dominating. 7.7 seconds now is the gap between Young O in first and Mark Fangman in second.
Speaking of that battle for 5th and 4th, I think you've got something else on the track that's interesting enough. You've got Matthew Lambertson, who's got a whiff of this Van Below's rear wing, and you know Matthew, he's the same type of driver as this Van Below. Once he gets a challenge up in front of him, he is not going to let that go. So while they battle up front, here comes Matthew Lambertson trying to close that gap and make it a three-way battle.
Yeah, and we saw earlier on in this race, Matthew Lambertson was pretty much attached to the rear wing of Barrow for the first few laps until he came under pressure from Nico Brandt. For Lambertson, though, let's not forget, he was the first of these drivers to pit. So he's slightly off sequence to the drivers ahead of him. I believe that Lambertson's on a more conventional free-stop strategy, where some of the other drivers ahead are going to be taking a lot less fuel at some point in this race. Be it one of these drivers wanting to get a little bit of clean air, just keep an eye out. I believe our pit window is about 19 to 21 laps. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that essentially means that the last pit stop, you'll only really be taking about 5 or 6 gallons worth of fuel.
And looking back in the pack here, we've got Mark Warmington trying to put the chase on to Pierre Bourdon. We'll see if he's able to catch up to him, but he's closing the gap on that. And Mark Warmington, another good driver out here who's very clean, very consistent. So as the race goes on, I expect to see him just kind of slowly inching his way forward, like he has so many times in the past, as long as he can keep it together on the track.
Yeah, Mark Warmington has done a pretty good job getting his way through the field after his starting from pit lane in this race. Andrew Aitken managed to get around Pierre Bourdon. He's managed to get himself now to about 2 seconds ahead of that number 92 machine. But Mark Warmington's a very cool, calm and collected driver. He's not going to really be making any mistakes on the racetrack. And Mark Warmington there in that number 17 Afterburn BFR machine, he's just going to be keeping it cool. I don't think he's going to be making too many silly mistakes here. I mean, I use the Mark Warmington spotter pack, which I know amongst myself and my teammates has got famous for just being chilled out and relaxed. So download the Mark Warmington spotter pack. It's awesome.
Yeah, it'll definitely help you relax during the race.
But I tell you what, Warmington's right on the back as they come through the final 2 corners here. I think Warmington, if he's going to have the opportunity to do so, he'll do it nice and fairly. Probably into turn number 1 might be his best opportunity, because he got good drivers came out the final corner this time by closing it all the way down the front straightaway. Now moving himself, presenting himself on the right hand side. Didn't want to take too much of a move there, as I believe Bourdon really wants to try and keep that 10th position, and just braking a little bit later, just knowing that if he does so, it's going to take a very brave driver to try and dive down the inside.
Looks like Matthew Lamson has had a little trouble. He's lost quite a bit of time for the chase for Istvan below. So it's Istvan and Marco with Matthew Lamson back a ways. He's lost some time. He must have had some kind of mistake happen back there. So we'll see if he can get back up in here.
Yeah, I'm having a look back, and I believe he just had a little bit of a sideways moment coming into turn number 6. Nothing overly major, just sliding the car about 45 degrees, kept it on the racetrack, no incidents, but that lost him about 2 seconds there as he had to control it. As out front, Young O is still your race leader. Gap is now up to 8.1 seconds to Mark Fangman in second. Tromasari in third is currently 15 seconds almost behind the race lead. But that battle for 4th and 5th, Marco Vita and Istvan Barrow, that is getting very interesting there as they come up to lap and Alan Wilson. Istvan Barrow's really got the draft here, but I know Marco's always the last of the late breakers, so close there as they came through the outer loop. Is Ballau going to be able to make the crossover? I think he lost just a little bit of momentum there as he dives down the inside of Marco. That's not what you want to be doing this early in the race still. But now it looks as though he's going to have the opportunity to brake later and get the job done over Marco, but running a little bit wide there and spinning it almost. Great battle between these two drivers.
Alan Wilson gets kind of tangled up in that battle there and gets a little bit of a spin, but he's going to be okay.
That is a great battle. I know you can't see it on the screens in just a moment, but Marco Viton and Esteban Ballau, again, putting on a great show. This is the battle for 4th position. And whilst this is going on, this is allowing Matthew Lambertson to catch these two up once again. The gap between them as they come across the line looks as though it's about 3.5 seconds between the two of them. Sorry, between the two pairs. So I believe Lambertson, if he just drives really well for the next couple of laps, might be able to close that gap back down. As last time, he gained pretty much an entire second on those two drivers.
Yeah, that's like that little charge is happening there, and they're kind of backing off and collecting themselves. And like you said, Matthew Lambertson being able to make the charge and close that gap. So we may see another three-way battle. And it looks like Mark Warmington continues to just kind of slowly pick away at his situation there. He's currently in 11th position. Really trying to close the gap between him and Pierre Bordeaux, but I really think Mark's kind of being conservative at this moment, kind of trying to save fuel and tires. He doesn't look like he's too anxious to get up past there, but we'll see what happens with that now they're getting into lap traffic.
Just to update you on drivers throughout the field, Steve Plays in number 13 had a little bit of an incident hitting the wall, as well as the number 11 of Akim Enbach, who was doing so well early on in this race, holding 8th position for quite a while. So disappointing for the number 11 and the number 13. They are currently scored as 1 lap down. We still have 14 drivers on the lead lap. UC Nimmerman in the number 82 machine is currently 14th and the last driver on the lead lap. We currently only have 1 retirement so far, but that is probably the biggest surprise of the day yet again, and that is Nico Brand in that number 24, who's having a horrible first part of the season.
Yeah, and that's a shame too, because you saw that last week when he was up in contention, and now this week getting loose, and that is a shame, because Nico Brandt again last season was one of our premier racers, and whoa. Looks like we had a little bit of an issue with the back marker with Mark Wormington there, but he looks like he's okay. But
very close.
And I don't really understand exactly what's happening to Nico, and all the best for him, because he's always been an exciting racer to watch and always been in contention. So whatever it is that they need to do down in the Nico Brandt's camp to get his car back in and get himself back in the race, so hopefully they can get it together for the next round.
This battle between Joe Masari and Marco Viitonen, between Marco Viitonen and Esteban Ballau, between the 2 and the 20 cars, still going on, the battle for 4th position. Ballau is still pressing on hard on Marco Viitonen in that number 2 Glacier racing machine, and as we talked about how it's allowing Matthew Lambertson to close, he is really trying to close back up to these two drivers ahead of him, being a little bit accident prone on the way, making a couple of very slight accidents as he goes around the outside there, Julien Pham. That's a very dangerous spot to try and do that, but Lambertson is properly on it in that number 19 machine, trying to close the gap yet again to these group of drivers. He had a bad lap that time, only a 1 minute 31.032, so he had a little bit of a moment, but Lambertson pressing hard, and he's hoping that these two drivers ahead of him can continue battling so he can get back into this fight.
Like you mentioned about Matthew, he's really aggressive, and he's really up on the wheel, and unfortunately sometimes that lends itself to him making a few mistakes. I think what he needs to do here is to just kind of run his race, take it easy, keep it smooth, and the rest will take care of itself. So what we don't want him to do is get close, and then next thing you know, we see him spinning into the grass.
A couple of drivers down pit lane. I just saw Jeffrey Kohlberg coming out of pit lane there. He's currently running 23rd and pretty much last of the running drivers. He's 3 laps down at the moment, but Fangman is just set his fastest lap of the race, trying to close down Young O. Literally 5/100ths of a second slower than Young O's time. So it looks as though Mark Fangman, as we're approaching half distance in about 5 laps time, is starting to turn the wick up a little bit in that number 22 DX Racing machine. And Fangman doing a great job here. He's still 9.5 seconds behind the race leader, but we know with Fangman, once he starts charges, he can really get on it.
We saw that last one too. Towards the end of the race, the beginning of the race, it was like he was getting used to the track, kind of feeling out his car. But that last half of the race last week, if you remember, he was really on, like you said, really turning the wick up, and his car was really moving. Last week it wasn't necessary because he was out in front, but this week any speed that he can find, he's going to need it because Young O is not traditionally one who makes a lot of mistakes on this racetrack.
Yeah, Mark Wilmington still battling with Pierre Bourdon in that number 92 machine. Bourdon doing a good job holding on to that 10th position, making life very difficult for Mark Wilmington in the number 17 Afterburn BFR racing machine. And for Wilmington, this is one of the things, unless you make, Mike Larson into the wall, I believe. Mike Larson just hitting the wall just a moment ago in that number 72 machine, coming through turn number 9. First driver I've really seen make a huge impact into that wall, but once you come through turn number 9, just the way the car, you have to go up the hill, then all of a sudden the track just completely falls away from you. Probably one of the most difficult corners on the racetrack, as you've got to literally tiptoe around it. But for Larson, it looks like he just got a wheel off place a little bit, and he is now down in pit lane.
Yeah, he kind of got a little too far outside into that overflow area there, and obviously there's not enough traction on that side. He just started to swap ends, and he did pretty good keeping himself out of. Could have been a lot worse than it was. We'll see if he can get some repairs down pit lane. He's probably got a long toe though.
And I believe that for Mike Larson, he was trying to close back up to the battle between Mark Wilmington and Pierre Bourdon in the battle for 10th position after having a moment earlier on in this race where he lost himself a lot of time. See, Wilmington there trying to look down to the inside. He's got Julien Pham, and he had to abort that move there, otherwise he would have gone 3 wide pretty much into that corner. Julien Pham running very slowly there, just trying to get out of the way of these drivers. But Mark Wilmington looks as though he's desperately trying to find a way past Bourdon in that number 92 machine. And for Wilmington, it's a case of, like, he's doing consistent lap times, but he's just not being able to find a way past at the moment.
Well, again, Mark Wilmington is one of those drivers that's really patient, really smooth, really consistent. So he's just kind of closing up. He'll get another opportunity, I'm sure of that. And hopefully next time he'll be able to make that stick.
So to run through your top 5 at the moment, Young O is still your race leader after leading all the way from the green flag. Mark Fangman currently sat in 2nd position. He is now 10 seconds behind the race leader. Jormis Hurry is currently sat in 3rd in the number 46 machine. Marco Beaton is still in 4th, still under pressure from Mr. Van Ballau, who rounds out your top 5. And then Lamberton, Borchers, Blitzer, Aitken and Bourdon will round out your top 10. And question I'm going to ask to not only you, but to everyone who is watching the stream live and get interactive through Twitter. Doyle, I'll come to you first. Can Fangman close down Young O at all in this race?
Well, for what we've seen in this race so far and what we know of Young O and Mark Fangman, unless Young O makes a serious mistake either in the pits or sometime during the corner, I don't believe Mark Fangman has enough car to catch Young O during this race. Now, that being said, that really is a matter of can Young O continue to consistently run this track at the speed he's at without making mistakes. And if that's the case, Mark Fangman, I believe he's going to have to settle for 2nd place.
And to anyone watching the stream live, you can also get in contact with us through Twitter using the hashtag Afterburn. Do you think that Young O will be able to still dominate this race as we're almost at the halfway stage, or can Mark Fangman close him down in the 2nd portion of this race? You text your, so not even text a response, tweet your response to us using the hashtag Afterburn. And I tell you what, that battle for fourth is not going away. Marco Vietinen under constant pressure from the number 20 machine of Istvan Balal in that number 20 Silver Arrow racing machine. But Balal's doing a sterling job there in fifth. And this is what we've been saying all season long. If Balal can get himself out of the first lap trouble, he can really be a good contender for the top five. And he's putting a ton of pressure onto Vietinen, but just not being able to find the way past yet.
Well, and I think he might just intentionally be trying to race a little smarter by continuing to put the pressure on Vietinen, just constant pressure, hoping that Vietinen will make a mistake that he can capitalize on rather than being ultra aggressive and trying to force his way around. As we know with Vietinen, that's probably not going to work too well because Marco doesn't bow to that kind of pressure very easily. So I think Balal's doing the right thing by just keeping that pressure on and kind of hoping for Vietinen to make a mistake.
Young O putting another lap on Jeffrey Kohlberg and having a difficult day there in the number 79 Aero X racing machine. He is now 4 laps down after having a torrid time in this race. We saw him down pit lane at the end of lap number 2. That put him a couple of laps down, and then having to make another unscheduled pit stop about halfway through this, about 20 minutes ago in this race. So Young O is your race leader, and for these cars as they're having to come through lap traffic, it's been pretty clean all the way through. The last thing we would want is a repeat of what we saw at Mid-Ohio when Nico Brandt was taken out by a back marker. Let's say this again, through no fault of anyone's, just the way that Nico Brandt was closing down into turn number 1. But for the most part, still clean racing all the way through this racetrack, and we haven't seen many driver incidents so far.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting you mentioned Jeffrey Kohlberg, and as the leaders go by, he's a very good racer, and unfortunately for him, he hasn't been able to put as much time into these tracks as he once did. He's kind of had to take some time away from the racing, and so his potential and the potential that we know that he has, he can actually get out here and run with these guys, but without the amount of practice that it takes to be consistent out here, unfortunately, he's suffered quite a few disappointments the last few weeks.
Oh yeah, definitely, and I think Jeffrey will be looking to bounce back as we go back to the ovals next week for the Kentucky 400, which will form round 7 of the Afterburn IndyCar series. Once again, live on Glacier TV. The Kentucky 400 coming to you next week. Same time, same place. 267 laps around Kentucky Speedway for what is going to be one of the most difficult oval races of the season, Doyle.
Well, I 100% agree, and while we're talking about these things, Istvan Balal has managed to sneak by Marco Vietinen and is pulling away.
So finally, Istvan Balal managed to get past Marco Vietinen in that battle for the 4th position, and I think for Vietinen, it probably just got to a point where it was also coming up around lap traffic actually, that I think Vietinen just got a little bit unsighted by Julien Pham in the number 78 machine. Didn't hit him really, but just because of the fact that Pham was on the inside and Vietinen was expecting him to move to the high side, that allowed Balal to get past him, and for Vietinen, after defending that position for so long, he is now going to be determined to try and get that 4th spot back.
Well, the question is can he do that? We've seen this before with Doyle. Like I said, I think he was just waiting for the mistake that you saw right there, so he could get around. And Istvan now has, in his mind, I believe, is looking at a new target, which is Dror Mizari. He's got a long way to go. It's a good 10 seconds, so I don't know if he can close that gap or not. But he's going to try to put as much space between him and Marco Vietinen as he possibly can. He comes up on, looks like Randy Krosnos. That traffic.
Yeah, lap traffic coming into play once again. But as I said, so far, these drivers have done a great job.
Oh, this fan is pitting.
Well, yeah, we are approaching that window for the second round of pit stops in this race. We also see Jussi Nimmerman and Olav Borcher down into pit lane. So it does look as though Balal is having to come down pit lane 1 lap earlier. At least at Marco Vietinen. This is going to give Vietinen the opportunity to try and make that position back through the cycle of pit stops, as we are approaching our second round of pit stops here at Watkins Glen. We're over halfway through round 6 of the Afterburn IndyCar Series presented by Glacier TV. Will Vincent, Doyle Johnson in the booth. And this is going to be interesting now, because some of these drivers can now do their short stint now and then do their final long stint later, or they can try and do that last charge coming towards the end of this race. And it'll be really interesting to see which way the drivers seem to go, because looking at the fuel numbers, these drivers are pretty much, some of these drivers are doing very even free stoppers, but some of the guys ahead of them are doing longer stops, but that means that they're still going to have to come down pit lane for the third and final time, but that final time they're only going to have to take about 6 gallons by my watch.
And that's probably what the strategy is and how that's going to play out. But for me, well, it's kind of interesting to, why was this Van Below putting so much pressure and going through the battle with Marco Vietnam if all he was going to do is pit the minute he got around him? That's an interesting concept of why not just ride back there and go into the pit, because there was absolutely no advantage he gained at all by making that pass and actually possibly putting himself and Marco Vietnam at risk at that battle. I'm a little puzzled by that.
Well, we know that, but let's not forget that Badal is always an aggressive racer, and I'm sure that Badal doesn't understand sometimes what the word just chill out means. He did a great job though in that number 20 machine, and he did manage to get the job done on Marco Vietnam. So if he can just do some stunning laps now through the sequence of pit stops, he might be able to keep that 4th position from that number 2 machine of Marco Vietnam, as Young O is still your race leader as we complete lap number 35 of 64 here at Watkins Glen International. Young O is your race leader with Mark Fangman in 2nd. Joe Masari is currently in 3rd with Marco Vietnam in 4th. Iswan Balao comes out and retains that 5th position, so he's got himself a little bit of clean air. And we're keeping an eye just to see when these drivers come down for their second round of pit stops, but my watch, it'll be in about 4 laps time.
I agree. You've got Mark Warmington making his pit stop right now, and if I remember correctly, like you said, it's 3 to 4 laps difference between Marco, Dror, Mark, and Young from when Istvan Below pitted. So once again, I'm scratching my head because Marco was able to put a huge, a huge gap between him and Istvan. So when he does pit, he may not even lose his position. So it's kind of strange. So we'll see how that plays out in all the pit strategies.
Oh yeah, and don't forget, we are asking you today on Twitter which one, whether or not Mark Fangman is going to be able to close down Young O in this battle for the first spot at Watkins Glen. Use the hashtag Afterburn if you want to get in contact with you, and we'll try and weed your tweets out throughout the rest of this broadcast. As Marco Vietinen just set a 1 minute 29.554. Scary speed by Marco. Just when he wants to switch it on, he had the opportunity to switch it on there, and that is a sterling lap there for Marco in the number 2 car. And I think now he realises if he can just push for a couple more laps, he'll be able to get out back in front of Badal and possibly be able to break the draft. And then just as we say that, a 1 minute 29.071 from Young O a couple of laps ago, and that wasn't even his fastest lap by 1/100th of a second. Young O is on fire here in that number 25 machine, and gap is now up to 14.9 seconds. So it's almost at that point now, like Young O can come in when he makes that final stop and come out in clean air. So that number 25 machine, Young O driving for Scandinavia Racing Club, we say that whenever Young O shows up, he's got to be a favourite. And here, Young O is just showing his absolute dominance on not only ovals, but road courses as well.
Yeah, and that's interesting. He's the guy to beat whenever he shows up, just as you mentioned. So the question is when is another driver going to show up that can figure out how to navigate in the IndyCar? Because it's ridiculous the amount of speed and the amount of gap in the lap times that he's pulling compared to the next fastest car, which is Mark Fangman, who we were just talking about last week, how phenomenal he is. and all of a sudden he's yesterday's news, and Young O is just taking him to the woodshed. So the question is when will that next driver show up, or how long will he be able to reign supreme?
And let's not forget, Young O doesn't have his friend and teammate Tim Doyle here at Watkins Glen today. Tim Doyle will be back next week for the Kentucky 400, and I am just going to be in awe watching these two on the Kentucky Speedway next weekend. But it just goes to show, Young O, whether he's with friends or teammates or by himself, definitely one of the guys to beat. And as I said at the start of this broadcast, Young O owns the world record at this track with the chicane, and even when there's no chicane put in place, he's still dominant.
At this point in time, from what we're seeing, I don't think he's in any danger of losing that world record, at least not today.
I think we could almost put the chicane back on from Young O, and he could still win this race at the moment.
If he's the only one that has to drive it, it still wouldn't matter. But I think what you're seeing, too, is there's going to be a lot of motivated people now that they've been out here with Young O. I mean, Mark Fangman, he's fast. Let's not take anything away from him. I mean, he gets on the track and he dominates any other time than when Young O's on here. So he's got a little motivation to try to figure out how in the heck is Young O managing to pull these laps off as he pulls down pit lane.
Yeah, so Young O, as we thought, was down pit lane at the end of lap number 38, expecting to see Mark Fangman make that hard right turn down to pit lane as well. He stays out for one more lap. So Young O is going to come down pit lane for the first time in this race, relinquish the lead to Mark Fangman, who is going to be leading this race at the end of lap number 38. Young O comes down pit lane. A couple of other drivers, I believe that is Pierre Bourdon, also down pit lane. So we'll keep an eye out on Bourdon, see where he comes out in relation to Mark Warmington as Young O comes out into pit lane, just having Joachim Polzner on his outside. Young O there is going to have to dive through, and he does completely. Polzner just giving him a little bit of room there. So that is lucky there for Young O that he just came out at the perfect time. Joe Masari is still down in the third position. We'll be keeping an eye on Mark Fangman and Masari and Vincent, now into pit lane. Vincent into pit lane in that number 2 machine. So for Vincent, let's see if he can get out ahead of Islam Barrow.
Well, and I think you have now it's Dror Mazzari and Mark Fangman are now on the same pit strategy. I have a feeling that you're going to see...
Oh, sorry, side by side for fourth position. You've got Barrow on the outside, beaten and having to relinquish a position there. Barrow just manages to get out ahead of Marco Vietnam. They were side by side up the hill there, and Vietnam just loses out in that fourth position fight by feet. Literally a matter of feet there as they're coming up to put a lap on GC Nimmerman. This will be interesting now to see whether Vietnam can make a move, but as I believe we've got Fangman coming down pit lane and Masari, we think he's going to come down pit lane as well. All kicking off here at Watkins Glen, and as always, all at the same time as Masari is now down pit lane.
Yeah, and I think there's a good possibility that Mark Fangman may have relinquished the fact that his race is no longer against Young O. His race is against Dror Mazzari and everybody else in the field. Because if you remember last week, he did the same thing, staying out a little extra, one lap longer than everybody else. So we'll see if he's racing Dror Mazzari and Marco Vietnam as opposed to Young O. So
yeah, so Fangman comes back out. He's led one lap here today. That's going to be the only thing that stops Young O from getting a clean sweep or leading all the laps. Fastest lap and pole position, unfortunately, as Young O is coming out to put a lap on Julien Pham. He's got Carson Borchers just a couple of seconds ahead as well. He's also going to go down a lap. But for Young O, he's still dominating in that number 25 machine, coming down to put that lap on Julien Pham now as they come out of the toe corner. I'm really just going to have to start calling by his corner name, turn number 7. As they come into turn number 8 now, Young O has got the lead back in this race. And we've got to keep an eye out on this battle with Ballau and Vietnam, as ahead of them, they've got John Ailes and Thomas Kroll going side by side into the outer loop, and Ballau and Vietnam is going to be catching these two drivers very quickly, as Ballau now, he's got to try and find the perfect opportunity to take these drivers, manages to get Ailes pretty easily enough, not going to be held up too much, but he's got to remember, he's got Vietnam right on his tail, but he doesn't want to give away what is now a 4th position for him.
Yeah, not too much drama there on that last back marker pass. We'll see what happens right here, and they'll probably wait till it's straight away again, and we'll see somebody pull over. Whoa!
Cool just getting out of the way. Yeah, Cool getting out of the way, and a little bit more, letting both these drivers pass. So Marco Viitanen continues that pursuit of Istvan Balau in the battle for the 4th position, running out your top 5. Rounding out your top 5 is Marco Viitanen. First place is Young O, Mark Backmann in 2nd, Jormis Hari in 3rd, Istvan Balau in 4th, Marco Viitanen in 5th, Matthew Lambertson currently riding in the 6th spot with Carlton Borges in 7th, Andrew Aitken in 8th, Joaquin Poltner in 9th, and Pierre Bourdais is in 10th. But through that sequence of pit stops, Mark Warmington did not manage to get out ahead of Pierre Bourdais, despite the fact for a large portion of this race it did look as though Warmington clearly had the legs to at least try and make a manoeuvre on that number 92 machine.
Yeah, and I wonder, well, do you think some of these drivers are now kind of just content with the positions that they have? There's huge gaps in the field now. I mean, I know there's still some racing left to do. We're only a lap 40 of 64, but I'm starting to see a kind of a tinge of, okay, you know, I don't know if I can catch that guy up there. I'm just going to run my race and salvage what I can out of the positions that I have.
Yeah, I think that's the mentality that some drivers get into. I mean, we are, you know, a good way past half distance now, and these drivers clearly know who they have the opportunity to, you know, make a pass on, who clearly is faster. And let's not forget, this not only is an exciting race, but points also make prizes in the championship, and these drivers are going to want to make sure they can get as many points as possible, as we are going to be completing our 4th road course event after here today, and then going on to 3 ovals in a row. So the number 20 machine of Istvan Balau has made a mistake, and I believe in the final corner, not quite sure whether or not that allowed Viitanen to get past. I'm having a quick look back on my replay.
It did not.
It didn't. Viitanen just wasn't ready to react there. Now he's going down.
Now he's got the inside.
Now here
it goes. Here we go.
Too wide. Who's going to be the last to break as they come down into the outer loop, into turn number 5? And oh, look at this! Balau round on the outside. Didn't want to give that outside lineup, knowing he would have had the opportunity to do the crossover into turn 6. But for now, Viitanen back up into the 4th position. Great stuff.
Yeah, he definitely capitalized on that little mistake. It didn't look like it was going to do much for him at first, but then he had a lot more speed coming down that straightaway and allowed him to get side by side and sneak in underneath there. So that was a great battle right there.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And again, the one thing that I'm really upset about is how, once again, poor Nico Brandt isn't involved in this. Isn't involved in this battle. I would have loved to have seen Nico Brandt fighting it out with Young O, Mark Backmann, Mazzari, Balau, Viitanen, and Lambertson. Let's not forget. But unfortunately, Nico Brandt is our only official retirement of the race so far. Currently sat all the way down in the 24th position, and it was just coming off that final corner early on in this race, just tagged the wall, and it just shows how little runoff there is on portions of this racetrack, and how unforgiving this track can be if you don't treat it with the utmost respect.
Yeah, and those little battles and those mistakes, like you say, with the respect, you know, what that's allowed to happen too is, if you look, Matthew Lambertson is now gaining ground again on his 2 favorite victims up front. That unfortunately he has not been able to get up there and get into the chase with those 2 and battle it out. He's come so close so many times, but once again he's up on the wheel and he's trying to get there. So it's going to be interesting to see over the next 5 laps if he can continue to gain ground and maybe throw some punches up there for the 4th or 5th place position.
And to be fair, I think Young O is still in complete dominance of this race. 19 seconds now ahead of that number 22 machine of Mark Backmann. How many drivers can really say that 43 laps into a 64-lap race, they're 19 seconds ahead of Mark Backmann? I don't think anyone really can do so. That gap has increased to 22 seconds across the line last time by, as Mark Backmann had a horrible lap, 1 minute 33, point one, just having a look back to see if he was held up or anything at all, made a mistake. He just got it loose on the to turn number 5, kept it out of the wall, but very lucky there, because as I said earlier on this race, if you get wide in turn number 5, although there's a runoff area, the way the car banks just means that you almost like you fall off the banking and you head straight towards those tyre barriers.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder for Mark Fangman, how, what goes through your head? You spend a lot of time in a lot of races in the official series and in the Afterburn series where he's a contender. He's out front. He's fast. He knows he's fast. We know he's fast. And then you get into a race here and you have Young O, and all of a sudden you're not fast. So what goes through your head when you're, it's bad. It's not even close. So I mean, how do you deal with that?
Well, I think, if I'm being completely honest, these drivers love competition. I'm sure whilst Mark Fangman would love to win these races each week in, week out, having someone who can give someone that challenge, that drive to get that little bit faster, whilst it's going to be scary for some of the other drivers in this series, is what a lot of these drivers need. You get into your comfort zone after a while, and sometimes you need someone to just come in and, just show their competitiveness, to just bring it back to root level of how important it is to be fast week in, week out, and not be complacent.
Well, and for his case, in the point standings, this one race is not going to kill him. So, but it's just interesting to note that he's still dominating, only from second position. So, and then you got Jordan Mazzari, who is also a great racer in his own right and fast. But it looks like you got 10 seconds between each one of those. But that's today. Any other day, we've seen it before, that gap could be much, much closer.
And, yeah, we're just getting a couple of comments in. To Ryan Norton, who's too busy learning how to turn left as well as right. We're not just kissing up to the arse of Young O. He is doing an incredible performance here today. And let's not say it's not just Young O. These top 6 drivers, O, Fangman, Mazzari, Vincent and Ballard, Lambertson, doing a great job so far. The lap times and the way these drivers have just been on it since the drop of the green flag. I mean, let's not forget that Vincent and Ballard have been going hammer and tongue for the last, 20, 30 laps now? And they're still going at it, even though Vincent's back past. Ballard is not going to let Vincent get away with this 4th place at the moment. So some sterling drives all the way through the field at the moment. And Norton, just go back to turning left. We'll see you next week.
Yeah. One of the caveats of being in the broadcast booth is you have to talk about where the action is. And right now, Young O is so far out in front that merits a little conversation.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, just like you said, the top 5 drivers, top 6 drivers, all great racers. And on any given day, they could be up front battling with everybody else. And we've seen that on other tracks. It can be a different situation on the ovals. We saw kind of a little different situation at Mid-Ohio and Mossport. So it's, and again, unfortunately, the heartbreaker of the day, and actually the last couple times, is Nico Brandt. It's like he should be up here somewhere battling towards the front, and what a disappointment for him today.
Yeah, I have to say, sorry, in 2 moments I need to tell you about. Poulton there just getting overtaken by Andrew Aitken just a moment ago, and we have a crash on the racetrack, and I believe that is Pierre Bourdon who's involved in something just a moment ago. 1 minute. And sorry, Mark Fangman, Mark Warmington down into pit lane. Mark Warmington down into pit lane, involved in an incident, as I believe he was trying to overtake Pierre Bourdon coming into turn number 8, just as he came out the corner, getting turned around there by Pierre Bourdon. Pretty much no fault of Mark Warmington's at all. He did come up a little bit coming out the corner, thinking he was clear, but surely by that point, I think that was just a racing incident there, but very, very bad luck for Mark Warmington. He managed to make his way back up into the 11th position. Coming down into turn number 8, we're having a look at it again now on the replay. And how do you call that one, Doyle? That was very, very close.
Yeah, definitely Mark Warmington. used up a little more racetrack than he should have. I think you're right. I think he thought he was clear, so he could move out to the outside, and did not see Pierre Bordeaux there, and clipped right across his front wing there and spun out. So unfortunate time for Mark Wormington. You hate to see that, but just a little bit of a racing mistake.
And just having a look through the communication, Mark did say that he was clear. His spotter said it was clear, so possibly a bit of a spotter issue as well as the driver there. That's unfortunate for both Bordeaux and Warmington, as they have had some great battles on this racetrack. Well, Warmington coming out of pit lane now after getting some repairs to his race car. Olaf Borchet is ahead of him as they came out of pit lane. That's disappointing, though. I mean, it did look from first instance that, you know, Bordeaux could have given a little bit more room, knowing the fact that Warmington pretty much got the job done, but at the same time, Bordeaux would have had the nice inside line into turn number 9, so he didn't really have to give up too much because he had the optimal line going to the next corner. And Ballau, is through again on Marco. Ballau having a look again on Marco Vietnam, and this is getting really interesting between these two drivers again. Hammer and Tong to and fro between these two drivers, and for Ballau, I think that he knew that he could manage to get something done for the last sequence of pit stops. We've got ourselves a little over 15 laps to go here. Do you think Ballau's going to try and get him on the racetrack, or do you think he's going to wait until the next sequence of pit stops, see if he can make that jump again?
Well, if history, serves us well, we haven't seen Istvan Below wait for anything. So I think he's going to continue to race, and he's going to continue to pass, and he may even pass and then pit like he did the last time. So I think he's so competitive that if he has a chance to get around Marco Vietnam, he's going to take it regardless of the situation.
But these two drivers having the battle of their lives on the racetrack here at Watkins Glen, and this is what that track really does, because it's so fast, and it rewards drivers who pushes quite a lot. It allows these battles to develop for lap after lap after lap. And whilst it might look as though passing is difficult, that's just literally because these drivers are not giving an inch at all. We've seen these drivers go side by side so many times, and the way the corners flow, it's like you could have the inside optimal line into one corner, but then the next corner, all of a sudden, you've got the unoptimal line. So unless you get the job done straight away, you could be on the back foot 5-10 seconds later. As Ballau is down into pit lane. So Ballau again down pit lane first. Now this is a scheduled free stopper, the kind of like even free stopper we've seen him do all race long. We saw Marco Beaton stay out a lot longer last time, but Ballau on fresher tyres is able to get back past. So with a little over 17, just under 17 laps here to go, it'll be interesting to see whether or not Ballau is going to be able to make that charge back again as Zhang Ou completes lap number 49 of 64. 15 laps now to go here at Watkins Glen International. We are watching round 6 of the Afterburn IndyCar series on Glacier TV with Will Vincent, Doyle Johnson in a booth. Doyle, we're not going to talk about Young O for a moment, but that second and third place, you haven't really talked about it, but Mazzari is really holding his own in that third position.
Yes, he is. You've got, like I say, Mark Fairman second, and Drew Mazzari has been in third place pretty much consistently the entire race. Keeping it, he can't quite get up to Mark Fairman, but he's also holding off Marco Vietnam and Istvan Below. They are not gaining on Drew at all, so he's still running his race, consistent lap times, doing his thing. Third place, as far as the points are concerned, between him and Mark Fairman. I mean, if you shear the top off this race, you're kind of seeing a repeat of what we've seen before between Mark Fairman and Jordan Mazzari. So, I think he's racing consistently, and he's racing, as we would expect.
As we're currently looking on board the number 59 machine of Joachim Polzner. Polzner, one of the new drivers into the series, part of the SimSync Pro team, doing a pretty good job in that number 59 machine. Polzner is currently sat in the 9th position. Having a look where his teammates are, we talked about Enbach had a good first part of the race, but then had an incident earlier on, which put him 2 laps down. and Olaf Botchart was also involved in an incident in the number 69 earlier. So out of these SimSync Pro drivers, Holtzner really leading the charge for this team, currently sat in the 9th position, and a good first outing for these guys.
Yeah, and that's no small feat either. I think anybody that finishes in the top 10
into pit lane.
Anybody that finishes in the top 10 in this particular field definitely should be proud of themselves and their team. And, you know, this is a field full of seasoned, very fast racers. So top 10 in this field, you've really accomplished something. I mean, you look at Karsten Borchers is now being scored in 9th place because of the pit stop. Andrew Aiken. These are people we've seen time in and time out kind of just not making a lot of noise, but just hanging around that top 10 spot. So these are good, consistent racers that you put them on a track with in the official series or with anybody else, and they're actually going to run up front. They are a lot faster than the leaderboard kind of makes it out to be because of the strength of the field we have here.
Currently looking at the number 22 machine of Mark Fangman, sidling his way through lap traffic. Steve Clays is currently going to go a lap down yet again. Fangman taking it easy now by the look of it. He's not going to make any stupid mistakes. I think for him now, he's content with that 2nd position. We saw him earlier on being a lot more aggressive. It looks like he's calmed down a little bit now. But when it comes through taking these drivers, you see Clays there just signalling that he's going to move aside, I believe, down the front straightaway. But I have to say, this is probably one of the most competitive fields we've had in the Afterburn IndyCar series in a very long time. And it just goes to show that drivers who would normally able to get themselves a very easy, top 3, top 5 are really having to work their way to even get themselves into the top 10 here.
Yeah, and that's one of the things a series like the Afterburn series gives you a chance to be competitive with some of the top drivers. Because when you run the official series, it's a crapshoot as to who's actually going to be in the race with you. It's based on iRating, it's based on all other factors. So you may never get a chance to race against some of these guys because they don't race that often. So this series gives you a chance to run with the top competitors in the field, regardless of what your iRating is.
Mark Fangman still sat in that 2nd position. He's got himself about an 8-second gap over Drew Masari in the 3rd position. Marco Viitanen is currently riding in 4th. He's 20 seconds behind Masari in that 3rd spot. And again, I'll be interested to see how Balau is going to be doing on those fresher tyres in comparison to Marco Viitanen. We saw last time by, Balau was able to get the jump on Viitanen coming out of pit lane. Be interesting to see which one wins this time by. Viitanen is into pit lane. Viitanen was into pit lane, and he has come out, I believe, ahead by a sizable margin over Istvan Balau. So it looks as though Balau is now going to have to resign himself to that 5th spot, which is, on one hand, disappointing, but when you consider the drivers in this field yet again, Balau's done a sterling job to get himself into that 5th spot. As we're currently looking on board of Mark Fangman going up the hill here. We're going to get it from another driver's perspective. We saw Young O's in car earlier on. And when you compare the lines of these two drivers, in some places they're very similar, but I've noticed, especially into the next corner, the outer loop, and through the 2nd section of the racetrack, they do take some very different lines. You see Fangman turning in rather late there, bringing it all the way down to you see a car in the wall. I believe that was Jeffrey Kohlberg in there, who just spun it around, barely touched the wall, so he didn't really hit the wall, just kept it out just. But meanwhile with Fangman, as he comes through this section of the racetrack, beautiful lines, bringing it down towards the inside as they wants to run over that strip of asphalt coming out of the corner to get maximum grip, and then got lap track ahead of him. That won't disturb him too much, but you notice that little bit of tarmac in the middle of the racetrack, that is where the most grip is, and you see that a lot of these drivers just pick their line to use it as often as possible.
Yeah, and what you're seeing here is, this really is IndyCar driving 101. If you really want to learn how to run these tracks, Mark Fangman is a good one to pay attention to because he's fast, he's got good lines, he's very consistent.
Oh yeah, definitely. You see there, Mark Fangman just pulling it to the left-hand side. He had a car coming up pit lane. That was Thomas Kroll in the number 63 machine. Falling in behind him there. And Fangman's going to come and put a lap out on Mark Warmington very soon. Disappointing day for Warmington. He still sat in the 12th position, but for a large portion of this race, he was having a great battle with Pierre Bourdon in the number 92 machine. Warmington's going to be a little bit disappointed here, as I think he was definitely expecting a top 10 finish.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he's one of the better drivers as far as the road courses for the team Afterburn. You've got Lambertson, you've got Warmington, you've got Larson, and then you've got the other, the kind of the real disappointing factor of the day is you've got Ryan Norton continue to be lapped by the field. His couch is just not getting it done today. It just goes on and on, lap after lap. So for Team Afterburn, that's going to be a real disappointing finish for Ryan Norton. But his teammates, Mike Larson, Mark Warmington, Matthew Lambertson, are out here and putting in a great effort.
And let's not forget as well, Sean Stroud, whilst he's known as one of the fastest oval guys, when he does turn up onto a road course like Young O, he is incredible on a road course. It would have been great to see Sean Stroud here, but I know that just like myself with university and with both finishing university, tough time for both of us. So it'll be interesting to see O and Stroud battle it out once again at the Kentucky 400 next week on Glacier TV. Running through your top 5 then, Young O is still your race leader. Mark Fangman is in 2nd position. Draw Misari is currently in 3rd. Marco Viitanen in 4th. Istvan Balau now 5 seconds behind Viitanen in that 5th spot. Matthew Lambertson currently riding in 6th. Carson Borchers in 7th. Andrew Aitken currently coming down pit road, just coming out of pit road, is in 8th. And then Joachim Polchner is in 9th, and Pierre Bourdon is in 10th. There's Aitken there getting very close. I'm just having a look back to see whether or not he'd get a black flag there. Very close as he came out of pit lane to collecting Draw Misari, who sat in 3rd as he came to put a lap on him. And we just got a little bit of a fan club from Mark Fangman. Joni was just telling us in our ears that if you want to see pure driving skill, just have a look at Mark Fangman at Alton Park this week, even in the fixed setup, because in the iRacing official series you have both the open and the fixed series running side by side. Even in the fixed setup, Mark Fangman has just been the class of the field this week. So it just shows the skill of Mark Fangman, which again almost highlights just how impressive O's performance has been in that number 25 machine. But let's not forget also, on the other side of that, Misari, Viitanen, Balau, Lambertson, Borchers, Aitken, Polchner, they're doing a sterling job just being, within the same postcode as Fangman for most of this race.
Yeah, and that's something you can't really take anything away from Mark Fangman or Jordan Misari, because again, the lap times they're running, how they're running a consistent race. If it was any other day, the spotlight would be on them. We'd be talking about them all day long. And it's hard. You can't take anything away from them, but there's nothing you can do about what the outcome of the race currently is. And and you mentioned earlier Sean Stroud. I spent all week trying to do everything I could to try to get him out here on this track today, because I knew adding that one extra element might make the difference in these battles, but I just couldn't get it done.
But we've got just under 8 laps to go here at Watkins Glen International. Young O is still your race leader. Field started to spread out a little bit now. It's a bit unfortunate that that battle between Misari and Viitanen couldn't go to the wire. And all the time that battle was going on, it allowed Misari to pull clear just enough so that he wouldn't have any further competition from either Viitanen or Balau. So it looks like the top 5 for the moment is pretty much secure. Running through the field, Young O's dominance has just been amazing in that first position. We need not talk about him anymore. Mark Fangman in 2nd position. He's had a really strong race, riding that 2nd spot. He's led 1 lap today, whilst Young O came down into pit lane. doing a great job holding that second position, which will increase his lead in the championship. Tromisari is in third position. He's done a really good job driving that Club International car. As I said just a moment ago, the fact that Vincent and Balau were fighting a long portion of this race behind them, that enabled Masari to get himself clear to about a 13-second gap now over Marco Viitanen. He's currently riding in the 4th spot. Viitanen has been going hammer and tongue with Balau all day long, so we might as well talk about them both together. Both done a really good job. Balau, for the first time really in this series this season, being able to have a really competitive race, even though he won at Mossport a couple of weeks back. They had that was a race which was just full of drama, to be fair. In 6th position, Matthew Lambertson, first of the Afterburn drivers, had a moment early on in this race that dropped him out of contention in this Viitanen and Balau battle, and it would have been nice to see Lambertson try and challenge these two a little bit more, but still a strong 6th position so far for Matthew Lambertson. Carsten Borchers is the first of the drivers 1 lap down in lap Club Scandinavia number 77 machine. He is doing a pretty good job in that 7th position, holding on nicely. He's got himself a good gap to Andrew Aitken, currently riding in 8th. Aitken had a bit of an issue earlier on in this race, stuck behind Pierre Bourdon, as well as Mark Warrington and Mike Larson. Aitken managed to get himself ahead, and also then managed to pull out a huge gap to Joachim Polzner, who's currently running in 9th, and Pierre Bourdon, who's currently rounding out your top 10. Doyle, have you fallen asleep over there?
No, I'm still awake, just kind of watching the race there. I was kind of looking at the stats from last week, and it's kind of interesting. Mark Feynman, Dror Mazzari, Karsten Borchers, and Istvan Valo. Last week, it was a 1-second race all the way down the line there, and then
he has caught Young O quite considerably even, and it looks as though Young O, don't know if he's trying to save fuel or anything, but Young O's last lap was a 1 minute 38.7. This time by, we'll have a look at his laps again. Is Young O trying to save fuel? Has Young O got any form of issues to his race car? Mark Fangman now is into pit lane to make his final pit stop. Young O was charging there. Mark Fangman was charging there. Young O had some very slow laps. I believe he was possibly down in pit lane himself. And for a moment, it looks like Mark Fang would have had the battle. But now Mark Fang was going to come down pit lane. And this is going to give Young O that breathing space once again. As we'll compare the pit in and pit out times. Young O did a 1 minute 38.7 pit in lap. And for Mark Fangman, it was 1 minute 38.6. So just a little bit faster down pit lane for Mark Fangman. We'll keep an eye on his pit out time. But for now, it looks as though Young O is back into the lead of this race and can just sail off into the sunset once again.
Well, that's interesting that his lap time was... That's pretty bad compared to his other laps. Are we sure he didn't have some kind of incident, or was he just trying to save fuel?
He was just pitting. He was just pitting. It was off of our screen. Was paying so much attention to everyone else on the racetrack for once. We forgot to realise that Young O had come down to make his final pit stop. To run through the strategy a little bit more, it did look as though there was 2 distinct strategy options here. Some drivers wanting to do 3 even strategies, 3 even pit stops throughout this race. Other drivers wanting to fill up their car all the way to the brim, just pit whenever they needed to, and then it meant that this last dash to the flag, you might see some of the fastest laps of the race.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. We got the word that Mark Fangman was catching Young O and then dashed upon the rocks there. Just know that he had to pit, and that's the reason why he was catching him. So,
yeah, and if you want to,
it does look like he's coming out a good 5 seconds ahead of where he was previously. No, it's okay. I just saw the clock change, so it's 27 seconds. It's
go back to sleep, Doyle.
Yes, going back to sleep.
Last time by, a 1 minute 28.6 for Young O. Just to put that into perspective, that would have given him 5th spot on the grid with race fuel for Young O there. Incredible lap time by him. He would only have actually been a half a tenth off, getting 4th position on the grid. So Young O, even though he's pretty much got this race in the bag, with just over 4 laps to go, still charging heavily as he puts another lap on John Ailes there. And oh, sorry, Young O, I cannot believe this.
Spinning.
Young, oh my God, no.
Well, his car's okay, so he's going to get back on there. Unfortunately, I think his gap was large enough where this isn't going to matter.
And just as we saw with Mark Warrington, it just seemed to be that they got the clear call, and John Ailes just sweeps across to try and give some bit of a gap into the corner. You don't want to be holding that inside line too much into turn number 9, and I cannot believe that Young O's race almost ended there, and that was a scary moment for Young O, as John Ailes in the number 14 machine. I mean, it was a very similar incident to what we saw with Bordeaux and Mark Warmington. And I think that even though Ailes probably would have got the fact that he was clear, I think he just probably braked a little bit too late into the corner. And just as he moved across, he didn't realise that Young O was already on the brakes. And that would have been heartbreaking for O, as he's led all but 1 lap in this race so far. As you see, O's car looks like it's got a little bit of damage to it, but the gap for Young O back to Mark Fangman is large enough that I think he'll be able to ride this out to the end. As having another look at the replay just there. Scary moment there for Young O.
Unfortunately, Mark Fangman was back far enough where he couldn't see that, probably didn't know it happened. Otherwise, his heart would have been jumping as well.
Yeah, for Mark Fangman, all he'll see is the fact that he managed to gain 4 seconds there on Young O on that last lap. Won't know the reason why, but for Mark Fangman, that could have been a race win gifted to him on a plate in, I wouldn't say in the same way as last week, but what would have been the same way as last week, as that the leader would have been crashed out of the race. And I tell you what, to bounce back from that, a 1 minute 28.9, so 897, Young O just doesn't know how to calm down here in that first position. Mark Fangman is still running in second position. He's got himself a 14-second gap to Jorma Hari in the number 46 machine in third. Marco Viitanen is currently running in the 4th spot in that number 2 machine. Got himself now a 7-second gap to Istvan Balal, and Matt Larson is currently the last car in the league, lapping 6th in that number 19 machine. But let's not say that these drivers have not done well because of the fact that they're 1 lap down. Oh, sorry, as you see there, a car just spinning on the backstretch. That is Jeffrey Kohlbergen in the number 79 machine, continuing with his horrible day. He is just literally fighting for 19th position at the moment. And for Kohlbergen, he's having a tough day. But drama at the last part of this race here at Watkins Glen. And I don't want to say anything anymore, just in case something scary happens. But having a look back at Islam Balal, he's got traffic all the way ahead of him. Akim Enbach is currently trying to put a lap, he's currently fighting on position with Alan Wilson. Enbach looks as though he's going to try and go down to the to the right-hand side, coming down towards the inner loop. It looks as though Enbach was so much faster up the hill, but then as they come down the straightaway, Wilson has the speed to hold him off. But then going down into the outer loop there, Enbach managed to get the job done. That is for 15th position. And let's not forget, every point matters in this series, specifically in the midfield, where, 1 or 2 points could be the difference between 3 or 4 positions.
Well, it looks like they're currently managing to hang out. Mark Fangman's still turning some good laps. So, again, second place is going to be his to lose, and Jerome Mazzari. This is a repeat of last week, actually. These guys going, instead of 1, 2, 2 and 3.
Oh, yeah, so about 1.5 laps to go now for Young O in the number 25 machine. That famous bright red and yellow car with the flames. You can recognise it on track. And it always seems to be the cars who have got the most dominant paint schemes, always the ones that you want to see the least in your mirrors. Mark Fangman is still running in the second position. Jorma Hari is still in third. And I'm not going to jinx it again and say that it looks like the top 6 are pretty much sorted, but the gap for Teenham have stabilised now all the way through. So unless there is a last lap drama, it looks as though these drivers are going to be able to finish where they are for now, as we have 1 lap to go. White flag in the air here at Watkins Glen International, which you're looking on board with Young O, coming through turn number 1 for the final time. Just again, getting it beautifully on that grass on the exit of the corner, bringing it up the hill. Esteban Bala still trying to make his way through lap traffic. He's got himself about a lap and a half left to go himself through the field. It looks like all the gaps now have started to spread out a little bit. Most drivers have got themselves a little bit clean air for this final lap as Young O brings it down through turn number 6. He's just got himself half the lap left to go now as he comes through into the toe part of the boot section through turn number 7. Next one little straight way to go, then into turn number 8, this long hard right hand turn. Break it early, hold it on that nice little piece of the tarmac, and then just that left hand corner. As I tell you what, Young O last time by set the fastest lap of the race, which would have put him on the grid in 3rd position. So Young O now through the final 2 corners, holding it nicely to that curve, bringing it down into the final corner for the final time. Young O is going to win round 6 of the Afterburn IndyCar Series at Watkins Glen. Never, ever count Young O out of a race that he enters. A dominant performance by the Scandinavian driver there. And that number 25 machine, class of the field, waiting now for Mark Fangman. He's bringing it through the last couple of corners. As you see Mark Warmington and UC Liverman, they're completing their race. Mark Fangman's going to come home in the 2nd position there. Sterling job there from Fangman. Jeffrey Kuhlberg and Mike Larson, they're both finishing their race. They are laps down. Same as Carson Borchers. Mazzari now bringing it down for the last couple of corners. And for now, Mazzari into the final corner for the final time. He's going to pick up 3rd spot here at Watkins Glen. And then you have Steve Clays, John Ailes, they are going to be completing their race. Marco Viitanen will come home in the 4th position. He's coming through the final corner now, and we'll look back for just a couple of seconds to see Esteban Balao in that number 20 machine coming through the penultimate corner himself. Esteban Balao will round out your top 5, and then Matthew Lamberton looks as though he's going to come home in the 6th spot. So just going to give it a moment's time, and we'll go through the final results. But Young O, class of the field here at Watkins Glen.
And Mark Fangman doing a .458 on his last lap. Definitely that is blistering speed as well. So no slouch there for Mark Fangman coming across there. So he was really moving as well.
So we'll run through your final race results. Young O is your race winner there with a time of 1 hour, 36 minutes, 50 seconds, 0.5. Mark Fangman will be in the 2nd position in that number 22 machine, 23 seconds behind the race leader. It's coming up slightly wrong on your screen, but Drew Mazzari is in 3rd position, 42 seconds behind the race lead. Marco Viitanen will come home in 4th spot in the number 2 Glacier racing machine. Istvan Balau in 5th, Matthew Lamberton in 6th, and then Carson Borchers 7th, Andrew Aitken 8th, Joachim Polzner in 9th, Pierre Bourdon in 10th, Jussi Nimmerman in 11th, Warmington 12th, Mike Larson 13th, Steve Clays in 14th, Akim Enbach in 15th, Alan Wilson in 16th, John Ailes 17th, Thomas Kroll 18th, Julian Fallon 19th, Jeffrey Kuhlbergen in 20th, Dave Jinks, Randy Cosno, Olaf Borchardt 21st through 23rd, and our single main retirement of the day, Nico Brand in the number 24 machine, who crashed out on lap number 6 of this race into the final corner. Biggest disappointment of the day, but I have to say some great driving by all of these drivers. Who's your driver of the day?
For me, the driver of the day has to be Marco Viitanen. Battling with this fan below all day long. Coming out ahead through the pit strategy to get that 4th position. That was some great racing by Marco. So I have to give it to him today.
And we're going to hopefully get the chance to speak to Marco Beaton in just a moment's time. I'll bring in the good old Afterburn teammates, Mark Warmington, Matt Lambertson, and Mike Clarkson. Mark, I'm going to start with you. You had a bit of an incident there with Pierre Bourdon midway through this race. It just looked as though it coming through turn number 8 that I don't know whether it's a spotter issue or whether the fact that you two just moved a little bit too close together. Just take us through it.
Yeah, I'd been seeing the back of that car for the whole race. I had one of those crazy races where everything that could go wrong did. And I saw Pierre was coming up on a back marker and I had to take the chance. I got the move, but just when I was starting to track out, I got a clear call, but obviously I wasn't clear. I think my left rear must have grazed his front right. Fortunately, he damaged it just.
And you came home in the 12th position. Were you hoping for more in this race?
Yeah, I qualified eighth, but during practice, my wheel came off in my hands. So I was busy trying to secure it and missed the start. I hit join, but there was only a second left. So I started, I think, 25th. So the first stint was pretty fun, racing through. So although I would have hoped for more, finishing 12th after missing the start, I'll take that in this field.
And Mike Clarkson, I know that you had were also involved in the issues, not the issues, in the fights with Pierre Bourdon during this race. Looks as though you got a little bit frustrated trying to find your way past on a 92 machine at points during this race.
Yeah, the thing is on this track is it's very hard to overtake someone, and I think he made it very hard for me. One of the things is also that my sixth gear was slightly too short on the straight there, so I couldn't take him there, but I think I was all over him, and I was clearly faster, but I just couldn't get past him. And in T1 he braked a little earlier than I expected, so I had to slam them and locked up the brakes, spun around. And later on in the race, the guys were talking on TeamSpeak, and I just lost concentration and hit the wall. So, crappy race, but it was fun.
And Matthew Lambertson, if you're there, you came home in the 6th position. You had a great fight with Marco Beaton and Istvan Balau for the first 10 laps or so, until you had just a little bit of a mistake and dropped off the battle between these two drivers. How tough was your race from that point forward? I think Matthew's gone to sleep, so we'll move on. We've got the Kentucky 400 coming up next weekend. One of the longest and toughest oval races of the season. You guys looking forward to going back to the first of 3 ovals in a row?
No. I don't like Kentucky.
Me neither. But I think we will be up there in the top 10 anyway, but I don't really care for the track. It's just plain boring, so it's just doing the lap and staying awake, I think.
And Matthew Lambertson, if you're there, any final words about your race at all?
I'm sorry, I was there. I forgot to press the button. What I was saying, to answer your question, was that I was never really as fast as Istvan and Marco. I was just keeping up with them because they were fighting each other and losing time. But after that, I was just pacing myself and hoping somebody in front of me would crash, but there was no way I was going to catch them. So I'm quite happy with 6th because I was about as perfect as it could go for me.
And we hope to see you all at Kentucky next week. We've got to say goodbye now. This will conclude our broadcast of round 6 of the Afterburn IndyCar series on Glacier TV. You've been watching the race from Watkins Glen. Young O is your race winner with Mark Fangman in 2nd, Drew Masari in 3rd, Marco Beaton in 4th, Istvan Balau rounding out your top 5, with Lamberton, Borchers, Aitken, Boltner and Bourdon rounding out your top 10. We'll be back same time, same place next week for the Kentucky 400, first of 3 oval races in a row. So be sure to join us back here on Glacier TV next weekend. Meanwhile, from myself and from Doyle Johnson, goodbye.